The plains stretched endlessly beneath a bruised sky, where the last of the daylight was fading into shadows. Eli Carson wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned against the splintered fence post he'd been fixing all afternoon. The storm had passed only hours ago, leaving the air heavy with damp dust and the smell of wet sagebrush. He was about to call it a night when he heard something faint, distant, a sound so soft it could have been the wind. But it wasn't. It was a cry, a human one. He straightened up, muscles tensing, his eyes sweeping across the open land. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence and the low rustle of wind through the dry grass. Then, from the far edge of the trail, a figure appeared, small, swaying, slumped over the neck of a weary brown mare. The horse's hooves dragged against the mud, its nostrils flaring with exhaustion. Eli's heart kicked. Whoever that was, they were barely holding on. "Hey!" he shouted, dropping his tools and running toward the corral. The mare stumbled, its rider slipping sideways. He caught her just as she fell, his arms wrapping around her before she hit the ground. Her skin was cold despite the warmth of the evening, her breaths short and ragged. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She blinked weakly, eyes struggling to focus on his face. "There, it hurts," she whispered, her voice trembling like the dying wind. Her hand clutched her side, and that's when he saw it, a dark stain spreading through the torn fabric of her shirt. Blood. Eli froze for a second, his mind catching up to what his eyes were seeing. Then instinct took over. "All right, easy now. You're safe. Let's get you inside." He lifted her carefully, feeling the warmth of her blood through his shirt, and carried her toward the house. The mare followed, snorting nervously before stopping by the barn door. Inside, the fire had burned low, casting soft amber light across the worn wood floor. Eli laid her down on the couch near the hearth, his hands shaking slightly. She groaned, her face tightening in pain. "Bullet wound?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She gave a faint nod. "Stagecoach. Ambushed," she gasped out. "They shot the driver, took the money. I ran." Her eyes darted toward the window, fear flashing through them. "They might still be out there." Eli turned his head toward the door, listening. Nothing but the wind. Still, he moved quickly, closing the shutters and locking the door before returning to her side. "You're safe here. I'll take care of it." He fetched a bottle of whiskey, a strip of clean cloth, and an old knife from the counter. "This is gonna sting," he warned softly, though he knew that was an understatement. He poured the whiskey over the wound, and she cried out, gripping his arm hard enough to leave marks. "I know," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "Just breathe." He cleaned the gash as best as he could, then wrapped it tight with the cloth, pressing down to stop the bleeding. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her forehead glistening with sweat. When it was done, she sagged against the couch, her strength nearly gone. "There, it hurts," she moaned again, her eyes fluttering open to meet his. There was something in them, fear, yes, but also trust. A kind of desperate faith that he hadn't seen in years. Eli swallowed hard, sitting back on his heels. "You'll make it," he said, though part of him wasn't sure. "You just need rest." She tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. The fire crackled softly, the storm clouds outside finally breaking apart to reveal a sliver of moonlight. Eli leaned back in his chair, watching her chest rise and fall, fighting to stay awake. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or why fate had dropped her, bleeding and terrified, on his land. But one thing was certain, whoever had done this would come looking. And when they did, Eli Carson would be waiting. Morning light spilled through the cracks in the window shutters, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. The storm had left everything damp and still, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and smoke from the dying fire. Eli sat slumped in his chair beside the couch, the rifle resting across his lap. He'd spent the night half awake, listening for hoofbeats, for danger, for anything that might come creeping out of the plains. Every time she stirred or groaned, he'd lean forward, checking her pulse, making sure she was still breathing. Now, as the first rays of sun reached her face, she blinked awake, her voice barely a whisper. "You stayed." Eli looked up from where he sat, his rough features softening. "Didn't have anywhere better to be," he said quietly. "You slept a little. That's good." She tried to push herself up, wincing as pain shot through her side. He moved quickly, steadying her with one hand behind her back. "Easy now," he murmured. "You open that wound again, and all my work goes to waste." She let out a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "You patched me up." "Best I could," he replied. "You're lucky the bullet just grazed you. Another inch, and you wouldn't be talking right now." She leaned back, exhaustion clouding her face, though her eyes were clearer than before. "Name's Clara. Clara Wren. Eli Carson," he said, tipping his hat slightly, though it sat crooked on his head. She looked around the small cabin, the worn furniture, the iron stove, the tools hanging neatly on the wall. "You live out here alone?" "Been that way for a while," he replied simply. "Quiet suits me." Her gaze lingered on him, curious. "You don't seem the quiet type." He gave a small shrug. "Used to be different. Lost my wife to bandits years back. After that, I figured the world didn't need me much anymore." A silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. The wind outside rustled through the grass, and the distant sound of a hawk echoed in the open air. Then Clara's expression changed, the warmth in her eyes fading to dread. "They'll come for me," she said suddenly, voice trembling. "The men who shot me. They wanted the money, but they won't stop there. They think I saw their faces." Eli's jaw tightened, and his hand went instinctively to the rifle beside him. "How many?" "2," she answered. "Maybe 3. They rode black horses, all wearing long coats." He nodded slowly. "If they come, they won't leave." Clara's lips parted in disbelief. "You'd fight them? For me? You don't even know me." Eli looked toward the window, the sun glinting off the barrel of his rifle. "I know what they are," he said quietly. "And I've seen what men like that do. I won't let it happen again." Before Clara could respond, the faint rhythm of hoofbeats broke through the silence. She froze. Eli's head snapped toward the door. "They found me," she whispered. Eli moved to the doorway, checking the rifle and peering through a gap in the shutters. 2 riders were approaching, dark figures against the pale morning sky. He stepped out onto the porch, every movement slow and measured. "You boys are trespassing," he called, voice hard and steady. The taller one spat into the dirt. "We're looking for a woman came this way last night. Brown mare, wounded. You seen her?" Eli's gaze was cold. "Ain't seen anyone. Just me and the wind." The man chuckled darkly. "That's so. Mind if we take a look around?" Before he could dismount, Eli fired. The shot thundered through the valley, and the man dropped instantly, his body hitting the dirt. The second rider cursed, spurring his horse hard, vanishing into the horizon. Eli waited a long moment before lowering his rifle and stepping back inside. Clara stared at him, eyes wide, tears trembling at the edges. You killed him." "Would have killed you first," he said simply, setting the gun aside. His hands trembled slightly, though his face stayed calm. Clara reached out, her hand brushing his arm. "You didn't have to save me." Eli met her gaze, something soft breaking through the hard lines of his face. "Maybe I did." Her eyes filled with quiet tears. "It still hurts," she whispered, pressing a hand to her bandaged side. He smiled faintly, his voice low. "Hurts means you're still alive. That's what matters." Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning the mist from the fields. Inside that small, lonely cabin, a wounded stranger and a broken rancher sat together, 2 lives that had crossed by chance, both learning that pain could sometimes be the start of healing.